Hello everyone, and thanks for hanging out with us for the Behind the Numbers weekly listen and e-marketer podcast made possible by VTEX. This is the Friday show that reviews the most, say what? Media news stories of the week. I'm your host, Marcus Johnson. In today's show, what people look at on Facebook.
And I don't know, we're 18 months into a major world event, and I've seen plenty of research showing that traditional professional media headlines have really leaned into scaring people.
Measuring attention.
Yeah, I think what Larissa Johnson is proposing is kind of the holy grail of advertising, which is to get at what the viewer is actually tuning into.
Breathing life back into Toys R Us.
Lots of store-in-store situations. It's really about the brand controlling experience within like another store. But for Toys R Us and Macy's, and I hate to use this word, is it just synergistic?
The ad frequency problem. AI in advertising. And Nicole's first non-work related dinner party data fact. All right, folks, let's light it up. No, it doesn't work. I thought I'd try it. I tried it before we hit record. It didn't work then.
You can blame me.
You know,
okay.
I personally, I think it works. It's like anyone else who is not a native speaker of American, Marcus, but we understand what you're trying to say.
Thank you.
I'm a fan.
Anyway. Joining me for today's episode, we have those very voices that you just heard. We start with Nicole Perrin, who is one of our principal analysts covering digital advertising, also the host of the Behind the Numbers ad platform. Nicole, thanks for hanging out.
Thank you for having me.
This is Nicole's last show, ladies and gentlemen. You may have heard this already. We're still upset about it. Her last ad platform was on Wednesday, and this is her last weekly listen and Behind the Numbers episode ever. Nicole, how are you feeling?
It's bittersweet, Marcus.
Yeah, it is. If you said thrilled, I'd have been furious. We're also joined by two other people. Paul Werner, he is our principal analyst covering TV and video.
Great to be here.
Hello there. And finally, we have Rahul Chadha, who is one of our directors of reports editing.
It's a pleasure.
There he is. All right, it's Nicole's last show. We're going to be miserable throughout the whole thing. Deal with it. We start with the story of the week, what people are looking at on Facebook. We then move to the game of the week, where we have our contestants, Nicole, Rahul, and Paul, give us the best takeaways they possibly can from each of the four stories we have for you. We then move to our brand new segment, Working From Somewhere. And finally, dinner party data will wrap it all off. Wrap it off? Wrap it up.
We understood what you were trying to say.
What is happening? This is not going well.
I threw you off.
So, thanks, Nicole. Story of the week. What people look at on Facebook. Facebook just released a report about what content was most viewed by folks in America on its platform. A first for the company, but it should have been a second because according to the New York Times, Facebook had been working on a similar report in Q1 of 2021 that it decided not to share because it may have made the company look bad. That's because in Q1, the most viewed link on Facebook had a headline that could promote COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy, reportedly reading, "A healthy doctor died 2 weeks after getting a COVID-19 vaccine. CDC is investigating why." Matt Southern of Search Engine Journal notes, a view is counted when content appears on a user's screen for any length of time. A user does not have to engage with the content to view it. And this report also discarded views from paid posts to boost a post. The Q2 most read posts report Facebook just put out offers a rosier picture of the company since the most viewed post in Q2 was a word puzzle, notes Kim Lyons of The Verge. Shannon Bond of NPR writes that, quote, among the top 5 most viewed links on Facebook in Q2 were Green Bay Packers player alumni site, a website selling CBD products, and another selling Christian t-shirts. They each were viewed by over 50 million Facebook users. And the top 5 most viewed domains people shared links to were YouTube, 181 million views, Amazon, UNICEF, GoFundMe, and Twitter, close quote. So folks, takeaways from this story and or Facebook's most viewed posts report.
Well, I think when a company pledges to be more transparent and then obfuscates or, tries to hide a report that shows that transparency, it kind of tells you everything you need to know about how serious it is about transparency. So I think this is just another strike against Facebook and the whole sort of privacy transparency effort that they have been, on for a while. It's just not a good look.
So it seems that there weren't any, I was reading a bunch of articles for this. It seemed like there weren't any meaningful conclusions to draw. Ethan Zuckerman Associate Professor of Public Policy, Communication and Information at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, thinks if the domain list included 1,000 URLs, not just 20, it might help. Is that fair? No meaningful conclusions to draw here because of one thing or another?
I think the meaningful conclusion in my mind kind of is the second, Paul, which is that, they kind of shelved this first report based on optics that they were worried about, but really they shot themselves in the foot from a PR perspective by shelving the report. So I think they did more damage to themselves that way. But, reading into the actual incident, it does kind of underscore how the difficulty that Facebook faces in trying to manage this spread of misinformation. The article was from the South Florida Sun Sentinel and was republished by the Chicago Tribune, which are two publications that I don't think people are on the fringes of credibility in terms of news outlets. The problem was just that the article kind of had a somewhat misleading or perhaps sensational headline.
Sensational? Clickbait? Tabloid?
I mean, it really was I think it failed to draw the distinction between causation and correlation when it comes to the application of vaccines to people. And so, but I think the fundamental and underlying problem here is that Facebook has a PR problem and they didn't help themselves at all, but when they decided to shelve the report.
I think that's all true. I do think that Facebook's PR problem is, in a sense, sort of insurmountable. We've seen over many years now that these media outlets that compete with Facebook are almost universally negative on Facebook about stories like this, even though, as Rahul just explained, the originating story here was from professional media outlets, wasn't inaccurate in any way, was, however, sensational. And I don't know, we're 18 months into a major world event, and I've seen plenty of research showing that traditional professional media headlines have really leaned into scaring people, keeping people afraid, keeping people watching, reading, clicking. And I mean, that's something that we've seen for a long time throughout my life, for sure. We're approaching the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and I think many of us remember that time in a very similar light from the media as well.
I think, too, the other thing that I thought of when I read this article was that, there was an op-ed piece in the Times maybe a week ago about some researchers at NYU had their access to Facebook shut off. It kind of just adds up in the aggregate to the feeling that Facebook's just trying to hide stuff, which is not a great look for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How useful is a top 10, top 20 list? Because the posts that had the most content views in the US in Q1 only represented a fraction of the content on Facebook, 0.05%. But you could also argue that lots of the top posts were viewed by tens of millions of people. So how do you view that? Is this list useful at all? Because it shows you the top 20 list and, these were viewed by 50 plus million people apiece. Or is it, they only represent a fraction, if that, of the content, so what difference does it make?
I personally would not be interested, in reading this report ever had I not read this article. I'm not sure what value or utility it provides, and I don't understand really, again, back to their PR strategy, why they're trying to make hay out of this. Just release the data on an ongoing basis, let people come to their own conclusions. It just feels like if they're trying to shape it into a story for some reason, it just feels like another PR move to me. It's just share the information, let people come to their own conclusions about it.
Yeah, so a few other takeaways. 57% of posts that people see is from their family and friends. Fewer than 13% of content views were on posts with links. And also content seen by most people, isn't necessarily the content that also gets the most engagement. BBC article was questioning the distinction between what is seen, detailed in this report, and what is engaged with most through likes, comments, and shares as well. What's seen, I guess that's also tough to really work out. What did someone fly past it and not really pay attention to it? Is it more valuable to see what was liked, commented on, shared perhaps? Any thoughts on what the next iteration of this report might look like? What Facebook could do to help improve the perception of them even releasing this? Where does this report go from here?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good question. I think that Rahul has a good point, but I also do really sympathize with those at Facebook who don't want to go sort of toward some full level of transparency for researchers, because I think that users should get some expectation of not having that data completely dumped. A lot of what we talk about here in terms of transparency, it's kind of like, well, we decided that the leaks associated with Cambridge Analytica are bad, but if we make the data available to the right people to analyze in the right ways, then that will be okay. So I do also sympathize with wanting to keep some of that much more under wraps.
Yeah, I think the challenge is almost insurmountable for Facebook and other digital media companies. Twitter and YouTube come to mind, just in terms of the amount of content they have to essentially moderate and, just the real-time challenge of trying to prevent this disinformation from being shared on their networks. It's definitely not an easy task. So, in fairness to Facebook, and in contrast to what I said earlier about their mishandling of this particular situation, they do have a major, major challenge on their hands. And definitely it's far from me to, to propose a solution that I think is going to work for them and their customers.
Very glad it's not my job.
Yeah.
That's all we've got time for the story of the week. It's time now for the game of the week. First, a quick word from our sponsor, VTEX. Everyone is talking about digital transformation, but what does it mean in real life? Digital Insider is a new podcast series about the digitization of retail, where business leaders, academics, and thinkers discuss how businesses are transforming and give their perspectives, practical advice, thought process, and lessons learned. Go to digitalinsider.com to learn more, or listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, folks, we are back. It's time now for the game of the week. Today's game, what's the point? The part of the show where we read out 4 stories and have contestants Nicole, Rahul, and Paul tell us what they think is the main takeaway of the story. Okay answers get 1 point, good answers get 2, and Nicole's knowledge of digital advertising level answers get 3 points. I don't know how you know so much. It makes absolutely no sense, Nicole. Each person gets 20 seconds to answer before they hear this. Whoever has the most points wins the game, gets the last word. That's how we play. Let's make it rain. Nicole will go first. Measuring attention is our first round. The NBA's VP of Paid and CRM, Larissa Johnson, advises folks not to measure views, but to check attention instead, writes Julian Gamboa of Adweek. Miss Johnson says measuring attention of an ad unit is a much more valuable version of viewability. Back in February, head of Mo Analytics from Oracle Advertising, Mark Copera, wrote an article in The Drum explaining that ad verification only solves half the equation. It gives the ad a chance to succeed. It ensures the ad is in play with a relevant audience and with an opportunity to drive action. The other half is measuring what happens next once the ad is served to determine its true impact. Nicole, measuring attention, what's the point?
The point is it's not that easy, but it is desirable. So, it's easy to get certain types of metrics that don't necessarily give you an idea of whether that ad is giving you a return on your investment, contributing to the bottom line. But it's really important to try to focus on the metrics that based on your goals, actually do relate to those goals.
Paul.
Yeah, I think what Larissa Johnson is proposing is kind of the holy grail of advertising, which is to get at what the viewer is actually tuning into. But, I just published a report on TV ad measurement, and just measuring whether an ad is served or viewed is already a huge challenge given the fragmentation in the space and the proliferation of viewing across screens. So then to expand from that and really try to get at this more holistic view, again, well-intentioned, but a major, major challenge.
Rahul.
First, shouldn't we be handicapping Nicole when she answers advertising-related questions? I feel like that's only fair, but I don't have anything else.
All related questions, yeah.
I don't have anything else to add. It's obviously a great idea, but the devil's in the details. How do you implement attention metrics? It's like something sort of,
eye tracking on everyone's TV.
Exactly. It's not like eye tracking on somebody's TV or their computer. You got to just ride off of proxies. And, I don't think there's anything exactly new in the idea that she's floating, but how to implement it, I have no idea. All
right, we move to our second round. Breathing life back into Toys R Us. We start with Paul. Macy's will partner with Toys R Us, bringing the toy brand to Macy's.com in time for the 2021 holiday season, writes Lisa Lacey of Adweek. Afterwards, Toys R Us will feature their own store inside of 400 Macy's stores. That's 75% of Macy's stores. These Toys R Us shops within Macy's will feature dedicated sections by age, interest, and category, with interactive experiences, activation centers, and iconic elements throughout. Miss Lacey also notes that Macy's will also fulfill orders that start on ToysRUs.com. So, Paul, breathing life back into Toys R Us, what's the point?
Well, I think the point here is that retail brands are brands first. And the ones that have really established themselves as identifiable brands in the eyes of consumers are the ones that I think are going to have the ability to do this sort of thing, which is basically survive in a world where they may not be able to have their own standalone stores like they used to, but they will exist as these brands within, other retail locations. I think we're going to see more of this.
Rahul.
Yeah, I think what was interesting to me was that Toys R Us, it seemed like this partnership was going to be launched first on their online site. So to me, the questions are really, is there some benefit to Toys R Us by picking back onto Macy's site traffic or their e-commerce and logistics prowess? That was the first question I had. But in terms of the store-in-store kind of model in retail, it's also just not a tremendously new idea. Like Paul mentioned, it's Toys R Us is not a brand specifically, it's a retail brand. So I think with lots of store-in-store situations, it's really about the brand controlling the experience within like another store. But for Toys R Us and Macy's, and I hate to use this word, is it just synergistic? I don't know. It's like Macy's is...
Minus 2 points.
Macy's is not well known, I guess, for a destination for toy buying. So maybe it helps both of them out that way.
Nicole.
Yeah, brand value. Brand value is totally the point. I think, you guys know I don't have kids, but I'm sure a lot of geriatric millennials like me will be very happy to be shopping in some Toys R Us type environment for toys for their kids and other loved ones. And I think lots of other retail brands that, for varieties of reasons, haven't made it as retailers in brick and mortar spaces recently. They'll continue to show that they do have value online. There's lots of other examples. Pier 1 is just one random one that came to mind because I've shopped there online recently, even though it sort of doesn't really exist anymore, but it actually does. It's cool.
Yeah, Nicole, now millennials is 100% the point here. That's who this is for.
I think the other point is we're going to start seeing a Jeffrey the Giraffe Thanksgiving Day float now, which we had not up until now.
There was a Wall Street Journal article by David Sebastian earlier this week noting that Target plans to triple the number of Disney shops it operates within its stores to over 160 in the US by the end of the year, as the retailer has seen a pickup in toy sales. Target, which has nearly 2,000 stores, began hosting Disney shop-in-shop locations in 2019. We move to our third round. Rahul kicks us off. The ad frequency problem. The connected TV ad frequency problem may be overstated, according to the Decoding CTV Measurement Study by Innovid and the Association of National Advertisers, ANA. Writes Insider Intelligence analyst Nina Getson. 85% of households saw an ad once or twice on average, and the average frequency was less than 5 times across campaigns. However, CTV's reach may also not be as broad as marketers thought, as the campaigns tracked reached just 13% of households. So, Rahul, the ad frequency problem, what's the point?
First, can I just lobby for Paul to get handicapped on this question?
Yes, you can. -1 for Paul.
I would say anecdotally it's a challenge. I kind of don't trust this research. I recently binge watched a show. This is a safe space. I'll reveal that it was called Celebrity IOU on HGTV, hosted by the Property Brothers.
Amazing.
I'm not proud of it, but it happened. I saw the same 4 to 5 ads over and over and over again. And as like a Gen Xer, it was basically what introduced me to Dua Lipa, because I saw the same ad for her hard seltzer brand maybe 28 times in a 2-hour period.
I had no idea that she had a hard seltzer brand. You're helping the world now.
I guess actually I don't know if it's her brand, but she was definitely advertising for it. So, but
she does not sponsor this podcast, by the way. Okay, just for people listening in, we have no affiliation with Dua Lipa.
But on the flip side too, I can't remember the name of the seltzer company. So it's like one thing I was tremendously annoyed at the ad, and I have zero ad recall, so I don't know.
Nicole.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? So first of all, I too am skeptical of the research, and I have a lot of questions about what average means and what the distribution is within that. But to your point, Rahul, the idea that like kind of reach being low or frequency being too high are equal problems, I think I would dispute that. If your reach is lower than you thought, that is a problem. You got to do something about it. Maybe it means that you're overpaying for your ads. But if frequency is a problem, you are actively annoying people. You are making people angry with your brand. And that is a much bigger negative.
Paul.
Well, I think the fact that Rahul saw the ad 28 times and Nicole didn't see the ad kind of gets at the root of the problem, which is that the reach.
I'm not watching enough HGTV.
But, you do watch other ad-supported TV, and that ad probably should have been served to you at some point and should not have been served 28 times to Rahul. So, there's definitely a reach problem. There's a frequency problem. I agree with Nicole that they're related, but not necessarily inverse relationship, sort of linear inverse relationship.
Free stat for you, over 8 out of 10 American households have a connected TV. That number comes from our amazing forecasting team. We move to our final round. We start with Nicole, AI in advertising. Marketing and advertising companies are increasingly using AI models to track trends and generate slogans, writes Brian Walsh of Axios. He notes that enterprise tech platform Futury has an AI application called Topic Calls that takes real-time data from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and 100,000 news sources, and looks at early signals to determine what will be popular in a particular market or demographic up to 24 hours from the present. In another example, Hamburg-based marketing company Neuroflash uses natural language processing AI to generate scores of suggested slogans, email subject lines, and social media language. Then humans pick the best one. Nicole, artificial intelligence in advertising, what's the point?
Well, I certainly think we're going to see more use of this type of activity. GPT-3 is really wild, does really cool things with language generation, but it does still need the human touch on top.
Yeah, he gave an example in here of Mr. Walsh of him trying to generate one of these, and I was like, wow, like he came back with a really quite intelligent answer. So yeah, very surprising how well it worked. Paul, what's the point?
I will start believing in AI when it can generate my podcast quotes for me.
+5. Rahul.
Was that a deep fake?
I don't think it was that deep. Definitely fake, though.
Shallow. A shallow fake. I think the thing that I took away was like really two ideas, which is one is that, AI can be used probably effectively, but more for product development, it seemed to me, although it wasn't framed by the author that way. You can look at these trends and then figure out like merchandising or what do we need to get to the market. The second part about AI being used in creative, I'm still skeptical about. We've long been on the cusp of this idea. The author talked about how some firm used AI to develop a trailer or a promo video for the film. I think it was called Reminiscence that Hugh Jackman's in. And I read that film tanked. I think it made $4 million in the box office last weekend. I still think AI for creative kind of stuff. It's one of those things that I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's happening slowly and then all at once. Like when it happens in some dramatic, useful fashion, we'll all be immediately aware of it.
Yeah,
like Skynet.
Oh, good. Title for a newsletter. Maybe it's able to do that, but anything beyond that, maybe not so much. Right now, at least, the global market for artificial intelligence in advertising and marketing is valued at just over $12 billion, projected to reach over $100 billion by 2028. That is a long way away, so we'll see if it makes it there, according to a recent research and markets report. And also Gartner thinks that by 2022, that somehow is next year, over 30% of digital content will be created with the help of AI. Argue how much help. But yeah, that's all we've got time for the game of the week. This week's winner, no need for a drum roll, it's Nicole. Nicole is this week's winner. Of course she is. She normally wins every week.
The fix was in.
But no. If you hand have won every other time you've been on the show, that maybe it would be a fix. It probably is a fix too. It's both. She answered better, and also it's our last show, so we have to give it to Nicole. Championship belt goes to Nicole, and also the last word. Nicole, your last... God, this got heavy, didn't it? It's normally just called the last word for fun, but this is your last word.
Well, and it's thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
Aww.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Paul and Rahul, for being on this show, my last show with me. Thank you to everyone else at eMarketer and Insider Intelligence who have made this podcast possible. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. You've been listening to me talk on this show for years. Some of you have been reading me as well. Love that. You've listened to my show. Couldn't appreciate it more. Thank you. Thank you so much. Find me on LinkedIn if you'll miss me. I know that I will absolutely miss talking to you all a lot. So thank you again.
Thank you. Nice things to say about Nicole. Send them in, podcast@emarketer.com. Before we move on, Nicole, we want to say thank you we haven't shipped it yet, but our very own Victoria, who edits the show, has designed something for you, and she's going to put it in the comment section now, so you can all see what it's like.
Oh my God.
So we are presenting Nicole with her very own Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's Behind the Numbers, the ad platform Hall of Fame mug. Nicole goes into the Behind the Numbers Hall of Fame with Mark. She goes into the Hall of Fame with Mark, the second inductee into the Behind the Numbers Hall of Fame. She gets a mug for it.
Thank you. Of
course. Happy last episode, Nicole. All right, time to move on to Working From Somewhere. This is the new part of the show, relatively new. We've done it 1 or 2 weeks now, where we talk about what it's like to work from somewhere. People left the office, kind of went back a bit, working from home, working from libraries, working from coffee shops. So we're here to talk about it. We've got 2 articles for you, as we do every week. The first one, moving work meetings to VR. Facebook is debuting Horizon Workrooms, a free app in beta that is the beginnings of the company's metaverse. No one knows what that means. Workrooms lets people with an Oculus Quest 2 headset gather in VR conference room-like spaces. Everyone has their own avatar with real-life facial expressions and hand motions expressed in the virtual world. Up to 16 people in VR can be in a workroom together. An additional 34 folks can join over video call without the headset. It also uses spatial audio, so each person's voice is coming from their physical spot in the virtual room. Participants can collaborate on a shared whiteboard, share documents, and even bring their computers into the virtual meeting room to take notes or view information. Folks, thoughts on this, and will it catch on? Maybe not tomorrow, but is there room for this?
This is like the stuff of nightmares for me. Like, do I have to run back from my lunch break, grab my VR headset, put it on, figure out if it's charged, have like a bulky, heavy thing on my head for an hour long? And also just like the kind of replication of reality in such a literal sense is just confusing to me. It's like when the popularity, it's the same confusion I experience when I read about the popularity of that game, like Long Haul Trucker Simulation or whatever. At some point, is there just going to be like a CPA accountant's test simulator? You could just do all kind of banal stuff that I try to actively avoid in life in a virtual realm. I don't know. That's just my take.
Yeah, I have a news flash for Mark Zuckerberg. I think he got this completely 180 degrees wrong in terms of the zeitgeist. There's definitely a problem with Zoom overload and people feeling like that's the way they have to, have meetings and conversations. But the fix for it is not to make it even more technologically dependent. It would actually be less. So if there's a way to do it that's lighter and that doesn't put people on the spot as much as it has, then great. But I mean, putting on this headset and trying to navigate all the technological hurdles that it's sure to bring up, I just think it's a non-starter.
Yeah, on that point, Jason Ayton of Inc.com was saying no one's asking for a technology to encourage more meetings. Who wants a more immersive form of video call? So I think you've got a point there, Paul. What about you, Nicole? Throwing one of these on?
Totally agree with them. I've said it to you. I've probably said it on the show before. I really like non-video calls. I've been telecommuting for over a decade. I like to use the phone, pace my apartment, look out the window, not get distracted by other stuff on my desktop. For some things, video is great, like for this podcast, so we can all see each other and have a really nice, natural conversation. But it doesn't always help, and even more media doesn't always help either.
Yeah. So, Rahul, you mentioned battery life. Ina Fried of Axios was saying it's an issue for VR headsets, especially ones that cost $300. So first of all, you've got to fork out that. But an hour-long VR meeting can drain the headset battery by 75%. Clearly, this is in beta for a reason. She mentioned saying that Mr. Zuckerberg's mouth wasn't moving during the demo. He had to leave the room and come back in to solve the problem. There are other companies who've been working on this before Facebook. Seashore is a company that's been working on VR-powered office meetings for a while, but obviously if Facebook does something, people notice. However, I'm curious about this. Facebook aside, let's pretend Apple was working on this, and let's look past the initial clunkiness of the software and pretend that it's going to be more like the movie Ready Player One. I do wonder if this is viable. At some point, if you can put the headset on and it does feel like not an avatar, but maybe the person is like, because video game graphics have got so good, sometimes I'm like, is that a film trailer? And so if you can get the graphics that close to a person, maybe it is a bit better than the 2D video chats. However, I think maybe holograms are the way to go. Like the Star Wars, because then you can walk around. You can see the person there in 3D. You don't have to put some big thing on your head. You can still see the room around you. So I'm for holograms. Let's figure that out. Our second story, core hours. Some companies are trying to bring definition to daily schedules by making some hours off limits for meetings, writes Ayana Ishmael of the Wall Street Journal. So, for example, a boss might say our core hours are 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. when folks have to be online and available for Zoom meetings. The rest of everybody's time is a meeting-free zone. Dropbox does this. Slack asks employees to limit meetings to 4 hours a day. Folks, thoughts on core hours?
Love it.
Yeah, huge
Boom!
fan. Why limit this to the online realm? If we ever get back to the office in any real way, let's keep this trend going.
Raul's going to start implementing this in his general relationships. I'm sorry, I'm only available for communication core hours. If you have a complaint about my behavior, please submit it during those core hours. 10 to 2.
I just think it's really important to leave people enough time to do their actual work, which is often not done in meetings.
Yep. The average workday has lengthened by 48 minutes, and the number of meetings increased 13%. That seems low. After the pandemic's onset, notes a National Bureau of Economic Research study of over 3 million workers. They anonymized email and calendar data in 2020. Paul, your thoughts on this? Core hours? Fan?
I'm all for it. I have a feeling that, I have a vague recollection that we may even have had as a company some effort in this direction before the pandemic to sort of have certain times of the day or to try to limit meetings. So maybe it wasn't times of the day, but it was just sort of like the sanity check on just not trying to overload your day with meeting after meeting after meeting, which happens a lot, both in the physical world and the digital world. So I think any effort to put some boundaries around that is fine by me.
For me, the best part of this article by Ayana Ishmael of the Wall Street Journal was saying that what are the needs of the team? Megan Flanagan, VP at Arctic Wolf Networks, was cited in the piece saying that since March 2020, her son's preschool has closed 3 times. So her manager and her teammates decided to limit meetings to the child's daily nap time, usually between noon and 3 p.m. So I liked that. The idea of, okay, just ask who's on my team, what they have going on, and try to be strategic about when we bother people and when we don't, because there is no one size fits all. So I thought that was a really nice example. All right, folks, that's all we've got time for working from somewhere. If you have any articles you want us to talk about, any thoughts, feelings about working from home, working from somewhere, working from anywhere that you want us to discuss, podcast@emarketer.com. Also, other questions about anything you like, send them in. All right, it's time now for dinner party data. This is the part of the show where we tell you about the most interesting thing that we've learned this week. And we start with Nicole, because she won the Game of the Week. It's her last episode. And she promised to bring some non-work related dinner party data. Very exciting.
Did. I promised that I would bring something that was not related to advertising.
This is because Nicole, every single episode she's been on since the beginning of this podcast, has brought work related, and it's become tradition and we love it. But she's decided not to this one.
Yeah. So I decided to bring research about something else that I really like, which is books and reading. And so I've got some stats from Pew, which has long done surveys of U.S. adults where they ask about their reading habits. Now, one thing that's unfortunate is this data is a couple of years old. Pew doesn't seem to have done a survey on this in 2020. I hope that they do plan to repeat the survey soon. They don't normally do it every single year. But back in 2019, what they found is that about 2/3 of people read at least one print book in the previous year. And a little bit more, 72% of people read a book in any format. So they also asked about ebooks and audiobooks. About a quarter of people said they had read an ebook, and 20% of people said that they had read an audiobook in the past year. And I wanted to pair this stat with a little tidbit about me as I am leaving. So you often hear about advertising data from me, and sometimes you might see me talk about that advertising research in the media, like in the Wall Street Journal. But the first time that I was mentioned in the Wall Street Journal, it was completely unrelated to advertising. It was about books and reading, and specifically the fact that I made a little discovery, totally unwittingly, about a reference in a long epic poem by Herman Melville to a story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Fans of 19th century American literature will know that Melville and Hawthorne knew each other and were mutual literary admirers, friends. But people apparently didn't know until I found it about 10 years ago that there was a line in Melville's little red poem, Clarel, that made a very, very direct allusion to a line in a story by Hawthorne called Footprints on the Seashore. So I found this. A Melville scholar found my finding this on my blog.
Wow.
And he wrote about it in a book called Herman Melville, An Inside Narrative. It's by Herschel Parker. And so there was a review of that book in the Wall Street Journal back in 2013, where it talks about how Mr. Parker himself revels in the new online world, in the new Melville facts to be gleaned from newly available newspaper archives, for instance. He takes great enjoyment in drawing a contrast between the ephemera produced by prominent dilettantes and the lasting contributions of diligent but barely known literary bloggers, quote, divine amateurs who have made important discoveries of Melville sources. One blogger, Nicole Perrin, even discovered through her, quote, marathon reading of Melville, a source for a passage in the author's book-length poem, Clarel, a source that Melville scholars had never considered. So that was my prior little claim to fame.
All right, Paul and Rahul, I don't know about you guys. I do not feel good about trying to follow that. No.
Definitely not.
Thank goodness you didn't bring non-work related dinner party data. We were just crushed every week.
I was going to ask to go last.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. It's a bit late now. That's amazing. That is so remarkable.
I thought I was Mr. Literary when I recited a couple of lines of Shakespeare and made up a haiku, but definitely can't hold a candle to Nicole on this one. Literary
links. That's fascinating. I'm wondering now how many more there are. We go hunting. Very, very good. Rahul, good luck, man. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough act. That's like trying to follow Richard Pryor or something, I think. Yeah, the data point that I found most interesting the last week was 30,000 square feet, which was the reported size of the brick and mortar stores that Amazon is planning on opening up. That compares to, according to this Wall Street Journal article, an average of 100,000 square feet for a department store. I'm just really interested to see how this plays out, to be honest with you. I have no idea which way it's going to go. You know, Amazon obviously has like this data layer of online purchases. How's that going to translate to the physical world? And are people ready to go back to stores? What's the benefit? What's their play here? You know, I'm interested to see how all that goes.
Yeah, we're going to be covering that in an episode in the next week or so with principal analyst covering retail, one of them, Andrew Lipsman. Sorry, I was half listening, Rahul. The whole time I was just thinking about Richard Pryor leaving the stage, someone coming out and going, okay, wow, God, that was fantastic. Now who do we have for you? Rahul Chada, ladies and gentlemen.
It's like not just following Richard Pryor, but my previous gig was an open mic at the Ha Ha Factory, so...
You did well. You did good. That's very good. Check out the episode we've got coming up on that. Paul, what you got?
Well, I swear we didn't plan this, but my dinner party data point connects to Rahul's in the sense of talking about square footage, or more specifically, square mileage. And it also connects a little bit to Nicole's because it dates from the mid-19th century.
Awesome.
So we're talking about real estate here and the price thereof. So what the U.S. paid for Alaska is roughly equal to what, I guess, I don't know if it was the city of New York or New York State paid for Central Park, which is somewhere in the vicinity of $7+ million, which in today's dollars would be over 200 million, which is a bargain any way you cut it.
Yeah, that is a good deal.
Yes. But the interesting thing is that even though the prices were roughly equal, the square mileage of Alaska is 663,000 square miles, whereas Central Park is 1.3 square miles. So that's a multiple of over 500,000 in terms of the physical space.
Wow.
But somehow when you say it like that,
location.
when you say like Alaska is 500,000 times the size of Central Park, that almost sounds small.
It's true. You might think that it would be even more of a difference, but I keep coming back to the fact that, the
Central Park is really quite big.
Yes, it is. But what it cost was roughly equal, which is pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's a friggin' steal. Very good. All right, 2 quick ones for you. The first one, ready? The US programmatic digital display ad market will pass the 100 billion mark by 2022.
He's being
as
me.
As third-party cookie deprecation looms closer. My stat, of course, is in honor of Nicole and her long-standing tradition of always bringing a work-related stat to dinner party data, and it comes directly from her Ad Targeting 2021 Living with Uncertainty and Fragmentation report that Nicole put out last week. Is that your last report, Nicole?
It is my last report that will make it out only with my byline. I will have a draft that I'll be handing off to others before I leave as well.
Okay, well, don't worry, Nicole. We snuck in a work-related stat just
Well
for you.
played, Marcus.
You also have a line, when the cookie apocalypse does arrive, the digital ad world will look different. Final thing I'll ask you on the show, if it's a big question, but if you could maybe summarize it for folks, because we're not going to have your brain anymore. What will it look like? What are you imagining that digital ad world to look like?
That's a great question, Marcus. So there's 2 main things that I have in mind when I say that. So the idea here is that cookie deprecation has been essentially put off for 2 additional years, but the world is not standing still over the next 2 years as people try to deal with that. So what are some big things that are going to be happening to change the shape of the digital ad market between now and then? One is the continuing rise of retail media and just in general, publishers being better at monetizing their data and more entities like retailers realizing they can be publishers. We estimate that this year, 1 in 8 US ad dollars will go to retail media already. It's only going to get bigger from here. The other major change is the continuing rise of CTV and the convergence of addressability across both CTV and forms of linear TV, including programmatic and addressable linear TV. We have gone through like a step change in the amount of money going to CTV because of the pandemic. And we're also now in a permanently declining linear TV ad market. So the important thing to know here is that CTV is a cookieless environment. It always has been. Cookie deprecation doesn't affect it. So as we head further toward cookie deprecation, we're also just spending less and less and less time in web-based environments where cookies exist. So the changes will have a different relevance in 2 years than they feel like now.
If you ever host your own podcast separate to this, Nicole, it should be called Nicole Knows Too Much. Remarkable. That's where we have to leave it, unfortunately. Thank you so much to my guests. We start with Nicole. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. She was there in the beginning. She's helped us so much with everything you can possibly imagine, and then took on hosting responsibilities as well as being a guest and just being a huge supporter of the show. So Nicole, thank you from me on behalf of Victoria, everyone else who's worked on the podcast, everyone at the company, and all the listeners.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much to my other guests. Thank you to Rahul.
Thank you, guys. And Nicole, it's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you to Paul.
Thank you. And yes, I agree. Nicole, it's been amazing working with you for the past, I don't know, how long have you been with us? 13 years. And I've been here longer. So we've worked together in many, many different permutations, and everyone more gratifying than the next. I will miss you, but I'm glad that we will remain in contact and that our friendship will outlast our time together here at eMarketer Insider Intelligence.
Thank you so much, guys.
It goes too quickly. Thanks to Victoria. She edits the show and also designs mugs, apparently. Thanks to everyone listening. To ask questions or just say hi, you can email us at podcast@emarketer.com. We'll see you guys on Monday for the Behind the Numbers Daily and eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. Happy weekends.
You want to hear the poem?
Yes.
Yes. All right, let's do it.
Okay, so this is just a passage from the poem that I'll read first.
And which poem is this? Remind me.
The poem is called Clarel. So here's the passage. The character Vine is supposed to represent Hawthorne, and basically I kind of definitely showed that was the case. For Vine, from that unchristened earth, bits he picked up of porous stone and crushed in fist, or one by one, through the dull void of desert air, he tossed them into valley down, or pelted his own shadow there. And then the line from the Hawthorne story goes, there lies my shadow in the departing sunshine with its head upon the sea. I will pelt it with pebbles. A hit, a hit.
What? When you first saw it, what happened when you first noticed?
I said...
Instant connection.
I just read that story a month ago.